Welcome to the Numisphere, a podcast diving into all things in the sphere of numismatics, talking the latest news and trends of precious metals, coins, currency, and more. Let's start the show.
Welcome on into another episode of the Numisphere, where we talk about all things numismatic. We have a very special show for you today, where we're bringing shop talk out here onto the Numisphere. We have special guests with us. This is Bryan and Michael joining us for a very important discussion on, has a new world order already emerged out of the dust being created by current political conflicts? What could this potentially look like? And what are the contenders, or whom may those contenders be, that could potentially subvert the dollar from its world dominance and replace it with a new? Guys, this is a pretty heavy topic, right? We're talking about something where the United States and the dollar could potentially be losing its ground, losing its dominance hold on the global trade, and being replaced by something different, right? But more so, this is also tied to the people who are on the other side of these conflicts that are happening around the world right now, right?
Yep.
Particularly BRICS, all right? BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now we have additional members.
Yes. The BRICS Plus.
Right, the BRICS Plus. And from my understanding, the people who have been, or the nations that have been added on are including Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. Also, with an invitation still looming for Saudi Arabia, who has not officially taken on that member state status to this point in time, from my understanding.
But I heard it's close.
Yeah, I heard it's close too.
Yeah, I heard maybe months or less. I've heard it's close. So
now, what's really interesting to me is that that's kind of a substantial trading partner for the United States. It's also been the linchpin, so to speak, in making the dollar the petrodollar. Right?
Yep.
We're talking about back in Kissinger times with 1971, right? We're moving away from the exchangeability of gold into the dollar,
right?
This is with Nixon. And then all of a sudden, by 73, Kissinger had articulated an arrangement with the regime in Saudi Arabia that all trade will be done in United States dollars for oil. Right. And in exchange, the United States offers protections, upholds the regimes. You rub this elbow, I rub that elbow, and then we were taken care of. This is what basically secured our dominance without a gold backing and held that power all the way through to current economic times. But there seems to be some serious cracks in the foundation, and there seems to be something else rising, and that is what they're doing with the BRICS nations. And guys, I'm looking for your opinion. What have you heard? What are you thinking? How could this potentially come forward as that new world order and replace the dominance that the dollar has been all this time? Bryan, why don't we start with you?
Wow. Well, I mean, I think I hearken. I mean, we talk about BRICS, one of them being Russia and Putin. I think a lot of folks have seen this conversation with Tucker Carlson talking about the weaponization of the dollar and saying how stupid it is. I mean, I think he was really, he didn't mince words. And said, he said it was the stupidest thing to do. And then you see, Trump saying, hey, if we lose dollar dominance, right? So it's worse than losing any war. So you have BRICS members, right? Talking ill of the dollar, reducing dependency on the dollar, or forcefully, as in Russia, right? They were kind of forced out of the dollar. So right. So they're doing all their energy trade outside the dollar. So that's less the dollar.
You brought that up, and I think that was kind of like a pivotal point here when the United States brought forward sanctions, right, onto the Russian government. And tied up, what was it, $657 billion worth of reserve assets that they had control of were commandeered, right, by the United Nations. And basically, those have now been said to be, they're going to distribute it amongst the United Nations.
When they did that, the rest of the world
here's a cut for you, Germany. Here's a cut for you, England. And
this is what can happen to us if we go against the United States.
Now, that's interesting. It's even more interesting the reverse impact that that has had. So as Russia is being forced out of the use of the dollar, now the other trading partners of Russia, which there are many trading partners, I don't know if we all know this out there for the audience, but Russia puts forward quite a bit of palladium, quite a bit of platinum, quite a bit of oil. And oh yeah, didn't they find the world's largest oil reserve in Antarctica on one of their territories down there just recently? So, I mean, this is definitely a huge force to be reckoned with. I don't know, Mike, what is your take on it? What do you think that could come from Russia's involvement with BRICS and being pushed out of the dollar? What did that create amongst the BRICS nations?
I think it's showing other countries in the world that you don't have to go along to get along with the United States if they're going to come out with an option to the petrodollar.
Yeah. And
they're going to be able to do business and commerce with this option, and they're not going to have the need of the U.S. dollar to keep them in business.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing, right? If they can subvert the use of the dollar and still continue with trade and growing, GDP and growing economic vibrance within their countries,
it's obsolete to them.
Right. Then why would they need it?
To it?
It's odd. We did a show here, and I had Colin on talking about the Roman Empire and the transition that ultimately occurred when the silver in the denarius was at a silver wash. Ultimately, when that silver wore away and they saw that it was copper, everybody gave up the use and they moved to something else. Mm-hmm. Yep. And essentially, I feel like those sanctions kind of kicked off the game.
Oh, absolutely.
To make that entire situation unfold, where all those member states from the original 5 with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and also the new, are looking to find ways to trade in a very efficient manner and come up with their own solutions. So what's really interesting is that they may have already done that, right? I think it was 2014 we had an initiative set up. I believe it was at a summit. They talked about having to reduce the dependence on the dollar. They wanted to move away from the use of that dollar and create something new. And as of recent summit meetings in 2023 and as of recent updates coming from the formations there, they've set up quite a bit. We have the new development bank that was created.
And funded.
Right, and funded, which allows for infrastructure building projects. They're allocated by percentage or allocated to each country in an equal way so that there's equal distribution of how these things go forward. But they also delved into making things like new payment solutions, right? And now you have India, I think, came out with one, the SFMS, or Structural Financial Messaging System. And China came out with SIPS, or their cross-border interbank payment system.
Right.
And Brazil came out with one of their own, PIX, P-I-X. Russia developed their own. So here we have these large member states within the formation of BRICS, which now holds, 45% of global GDP, 44% of global GDP at this point, if we were to include Saudi Arabia in those numbers.
Well over 30%, though, well over the G7.
Right, well over the G7. It's very important to recognize that, right? The G7, they're currently the ones that are basically dictating those terms with the SWIFT system. And the SWIFT system uses the dollar to pipe liquidity through all the channels that are there. Right. So now BRICS is bigger than G7. What are you finding, Mike?
So I got the G7 countries account for $46 trillion in GDP against the BRICS nations that have $30.8 trillion. So
wow, that's a difference.
Yep, big difference.
Wow,
and they don't have what do we at, a $30 trillion debt?
33 trillion.
33 trillion.
Yeah. No, we're 34.
Is it? Well,
yes, and growing.
It's going. What is it? Going on. It's growing 1 trillion every 100 days. I think that's where we're at with the debt.
Yeah, but approximately 1 trillion every 100 days was the last pacing of the national debt.
Yes,
as it continues to climb. I'd be curious to know what the viewers think. You guys should definitely leave a comment about comments below about what could be the correlation here with a new world order, and could BRICS be that person who has already put those mechanisms into play, and they're about to pull that trigger for us. Moving forward with the BRICS pay system, I kind of updated myself just generally on that topic, and it looks to be that they want to base that on digital technology. So they were talking about the use of cryptocurrency, the use of a distributed ledger platform, and making this a super efficient, super economical way to execute payments for trade between nations. What I understand that to be is nobody wanted to have one dominant currency that all other currencies were valued against, similar to how the structure is with the special drawing rights and the International Monetary Fund, where they've currently added or allocated, I believe it's 43% of that basket is dependent upon the performance of the dollar. So that's why we're seen as the global reserve currency at this time. And then I believe it's five other members of the G7 have currencies in that same basket, but they're rated down in very small portions comparatively.
I think also I like to say about the BRICS too, and they do share like responsibilities. So Russia's in charge one for 1 year, and then China's the next year, and then somebody else. So I like the whole idea of BRICS and like how they share authority or decision making or championing. I'd say the cause of their, I guess, trading partnerships, right? Every year, and I think that's also attractive.
Yeah, it's
too.
kind of a unique chemistry.
Yeah.
Not one that we're familiar with. It's almost like somebody got together all the kids that were bullied in high school by the big bully, being the U.S., right? And they all have their traumas, and they all say, I can deal with this, I can deal with that.
Well, we were
but I
talking
can't deal
about
with
the uni, right? So we were at a unipolar. Now we're at a multipolar, and I think we're trying to figure out as a society,
right?
What is different, what does good look like in a world where we have more than just one dominant currency,
right?
We have multiple dominant currencies, and how is that represented on a global stage, right? And that's, to me, I like that sharing of that power, or leading the charge, as it were.
Yep,
so everybody
absolutely.
feels like they have skin in the game.
I also heard that BRICS Pay may end up being backed with this digital currency that they'll exchange, backed by commodities such as oil and gold. Now, you had some information. You did a little bit of research on the gold production value of BRICS. What did you come up with, Mike?
So the top 10 producers of gold in 2024, starting at the top, number one was China with 370 tons of gold.
And this is being produced. What's on the books?
Produced, yep.
Okay.
On top of that, their central banks buy up gold from around the world. So they're producing it and buying it all up.
And now they do that through the Shanghai Exchange. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah. Now that's interesting, because I heard from somewhere, there's obviously a lot of people that are much more well-informed about this, but I heard from somewhere that there may be a migration of paper futures contracts from the commodities exchange that we use to dictate our spot price, where they then jump over to the LME, which is compliant with Basel III. They then take their physical deposit or their physical withdrawal, move over across the street, because the Shanghai Exchange, I guess, has multiple locations in all different countries. And then they simply deposit that physical and immediately exchange it for oil bonds.
Is there some type of arbitrage happening? Right? I think that's what they call that.
I don't know. I think the audience needs to answer that. Do you think a potential arbitrage could be happening within the paper futures markets? And is there a potential that they could be utilizing this to take down the U.S. dollar by increasing that value of gold, at least the prospective value of gold? Let us know by putting your comment down below. Yeah, it's a funny game, but seriously,
yeah,
it feels as though they've made a payment system. They've made so first off, they made a declaration. They know that they were bullied. They wanted to get away from that. They went forward and they created an infrastructure, right? Then they got the final punch in the mouth with the sanctions, and then they finally said, okay, we're going to do it different.
Yeah.
Now they put that forward, and they're coming back to the table with more GDP, with more gold, with more oil, with a faster payment system, right? Because their cryptocurrency system is settling in 3 to 5 seconds. Our SWIFT system can take 3 to 5 days, right? Through traditional Nostro Vostro accounts.
Right.
It can be a very painful process. They've gone and checked all the boxes. If they were able to put this forward, could this essentially be that new world order? Is it them who fills these shoes? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that a lot of African nations are now just recently asked for their gold back.
The repatriatization of gold. Yes, that's a great topic.
I mean, it's just all these things, that are just, not a coincidence, and I think, Germany did it, took I think of 5 or 6 years back. I forget when it was, but it's been a while, but it took a good year for them to get all their hundreds of tons of gold.
Right.
Which it's like,
my understanding is that the number of countries has increased exponentially on the people who want to patriotize their gold.
Yep.
That number is not publicly accessible from my understanding, so we can't make a confirmation on that. But do you think that could be telling? Do you think they see some writing on the wall that something may be coming and the gold is going to be important for them to have in their custody?
Yep. I think a lot of countries are seeing what's happening here in America and notice that America is not concerned with the debt.
Right.
The debt.
Right.
I don't think a lot of people realize too that with our fiat currency, we don't have gold backing our dollar.
Right.
Everyone just assumes they hear, that their whole lives Fort Knox has gold.
Right.
It's backing the dollar, but that's not the case.
Right. It's a blurry history in the mind of many. And who knows if that's deliberate or not. That's really just a product of the institution, I suppose.
Mnuchin said the gold was good, though, right?
Steve Mnuchin?
Mnuchin, that's Stephen. He said the gold was good.
Well, he did that the last time.
You're talking about the treasurer under Trump?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I had to drop it there, but
he was a movie director. He produced like 40 director or producer.
He never said the gold was
I think.
there. He never said we did a full audit. He never said anything about that. He just said gold is good.
Well, the next treasurer, Rosie Rios, made that proclamation. I actually saw that on the podium. I saw the gold, and the gold is there. And that was her proclamation.
Okay.
Well, I hope that falls to be true. And I also hope that there's a ton of it because we're going to need it.
I would love the audit on that one. It would be extremely helpful to see something.
Now, here's something really interesting. I went forward to find out, how many people are actually in line to become a part of BRICS. I think that this is important for our viewers to know. Right? This is not just the 5 plus another 5. We're talking big numbers here. So check this out. Right now, we have a waiting list with applications that include Algeria, Bahrain, Bangladesh, Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Pakistan, Palestine, Senegal, Thailand, Venezuela, Vietnam, Nigeria. And behind that, there's another 25 separate nations that have made public proclamations or expressed interest publicly in joining themselves. So we have 15 applicants plus another 25 backlog, and they're already rolling with 10 if you include Saudi Arabia being in that 10. That's a big deal. We're talking about the majority of the world is going to be a part of the BRICS nations as compared to the United Nations and our G7 and what we got going on over here. Right. Oddly enough, the conflict that's taking place out there right now in Israel, the recent happenings with Iran. Mike, you found something that kind of sparked my curiosity. Maybe you want to share this.
So I was really interested when I found that that they had the Kazan Forum that was held from May 14th to the 19th, and the ambassador to Russia from Iran stated that, I believe it was like 66% of their business is done in Russian rubles.
Right. This is Iran stating that 60% of their business is done in Russian rubles.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. And that they were
on board with a
BRICS currency,
a BRICS pay,
and that they are going to come out with a BRICS. It was more of we're going to go forward and do this. And within 24 hours of that forum coming to an end on the 19th, the Iranian president's helicopter fell out of the sky.
That's a coincidence. Wow.
All in the same week.
I think that could be more than a coincidence. That actually sounds like Gaddafi.
Like you said, Gaddafi.
Gaddafi.
They just didn't waste any time.
Just expedited to be that quick. Now, I hope that that's not the case. I have no idea what may have happened. I've heard many things, and I don't know what is confirmed. We won't know that, I guess, until the news cycle settles down a little bit and we get some after reporting. But that's a pretty serious action. Yeah. I'm sure that if it's seen to be the fault of any one nation, that could be held. They could be held responsible for that, and there may be retaliation or recourse. Right? Either through Iran or an ally, which now that they're part of BRICS, they have the entire BRICS nations behind them.
Yep. Well, I find it interesting, though, and maybe a little, conspiracy, right? Because they said they lost contact, right? So there was 3 helicopters. There was the one main that went down, but there was 2 to assist.
Okay.
But they never mentioned those. They said, they lost contact, and they didn't know where anything was. It's like, well, there was 2 other choppers right there.
Did they find those 2 choppers, or those 2 choppers didn't go down?
They were all together. They were all traveling together.
Very suspicious stuff.
So, it's very interesting.
Very suspicious stuff. And I suppose when you're talking about changing a world order and bringing forward a new world order, this is part of that process, right? While we go into this seemingly perpetual war, both with Ukraine and Israel, and growing in its size, it's concerning, but my hope is that we can find a transition quickly with a little bit less violence here. Right. I kind of like what the BRICS member states are doing by trying to protect their own currency, but have free trade amongst the rest of the nations by creating a neutral asset to exchange between themselves. I wonder if we could kind of create something similar.
I mean, I always go back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, right? And it was a very economical book, right? It talks about strategy, but also saying that how much it costs, like 3,000 ounces of silver a day for all these troops and everything else. I think we need to if we get to a currency or currencies that are fair and balanced and stable and hold their value, and not like our current dollar, which doesn't. I mean, I think we get back to you just can't make money out of just nowhere, right? And it's Keynesian. So I mean, to me, I think it comes back to a more fairer tool, whatever that is. Gold, silver, platinum, palladium, cryptos, maybe a combination of that, but they can hold their value. And to me, that just gets rid of a lot of things we talk about a lot in the shop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible, the potential when involving cryptocurrency. And I'm going to include that here with the Numisphere, because ultimately those coins may end up becoming coins collected in the future as well. But you can tie through a smart contract a nominal value of gold or any other commodity. You could even do things like distribute equity on a home that you own and tokenize that value and exchange that for other forms of value. What I really like when it comes to the purpose of gold is it kicks out that number one pain in the butt, which was always the transportability problem, right? When countries wanted to settle debts and settle a ledger, they had to wait for a shipment that could take up to 6 months to come over, and we don't know how much is actually going to make it at the end of that journey. Whereas cryptocurrency can tie in that smart contract and transport that value in that 3 to 5 seconds with settlement on both ends of the ledger. Now, that's really unique. And I think that could be a supercharger for our economy if we started using things like that on mass scale.
Yeah. And I think there'll be multiple ways we do it.
Sure.
I mean, I think that the one thing that I always harken back to is we have to have truth, and we have to have, I think a system where we don't have so many derivatives where we don't know who owns what, because there's derivatives on a derivative on a derivative. And I think that's where we get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah. I think that an open, transparent, distributed ledger, right, where everybody can see it, everybody can double check what's going on, they know where the money is flowing. It would curb those bad actions, right? Yeah, it may hinder some of the privacy, but even those things can be made to be accommodating for the private citizen for use, right? But still, something like that could be a solution. Certainly kind of overcome the challenges that we have with our current dollar.
It could be, where we use like use like tokenization for more longer distance, and we have more physical at the smaller distance, in our local towns. Like, how we transact. We might small, medium, and large. We might have 3 different ways of doing commerce.
One of the countries that came up as being those expressing public interest, that was that list of 25, was Zimbabwe. And I think that Zimbabwe is pretty significant to be on that list, seeing what they've recently done, right, by instating a gold-backed currency and having to reintroduce that back into the population. Right. I think first steps were they were issuing gold coinage, but basically the results of that were that only the wealthy within the nation were able to access these gold coins and transact with them. So now they're pushing forward, I believe, with a digital variation of this gold, or actually, no, the currency itself. So their paper currency will be backed by a denomination of gold. Right. It was my understanding.
Right. Well, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in having a vehicle to always get the physical, whatever it is, backed. And I think that's the key between, something that could be manipulated versus, right, you always have to, the audit is me.
Being stackers,
right.
All 3 of us here are stackers, right? There's nothing that will replace the physical and having custody of that physical in your hand. But when you're having to move money around in a digital environment, how can you do that, getting the closest feeling of as little counterparty risk as possible, and knowing that the value of what you put out there is going to return to you with whatever it is that you purchase, right? Hopefully that'll be the next evolution, but we might have even gotten ahead of ourselves there, right?
As long as
First we have to go through the transition, all right? First we got to wait and usher in this new world order.
I think we know. I think the first thing is we all understand and we at least agree on what money is, and I think understanding, that what we are currently in a Keynesian environment, right?
Yes,
there's more than just Keynesian. There's Austrian, right? There's
sure.
We can choose something to be different, right? So I think that should spur the conversation with everybody out there, right? And I think that's a good conversation. I always ask, like I was talking to a controller at my client today, and I was like, "Are you a Keynesian or Austrian?" He goes, I used to know that, right? And he's a controller, financial controller of a company.
Yeah.
But I think just knowing that, to me, that's not just I'm smarter than you. It's just, hey, there's more than one option.
Right.
And
I think we've all become so entrapped in this hamster wheel effect, and it's hard for us to see outside of our immediate environment.
Right.
But a lot of people are kind of broadening their scope. There was one other interesting thing, because, if a new world order were to come forward, it would have to be able to participate with what is the current G7. So I was poking around and I found something really interesting that was coming out of the Bank of International Settlement. So this is the BIS, and what they put forward was called Project M Bridge, which was pretty much everything we just described: a decentralized, distributed ledger that was open source and transparent, and then a tokenization of central bank digital currencies to be exchanged, similar to a basket of currencies like an SDR. I don't know the status on if mBridge is live and active, but I do know that the Bank for International Settlement made it a public announcement, and it's very possible that they could be working alongside BRICS nations with their potential central bank digital currencies.
Well, there you go. They should hire us.
Why? For what?
Well, because we're coming up with it, and they probably spend a whole lot of money, and they can just get us straight into a room.
What do you think? What do you think is the likelihood here? Do you think that we're going to lose our throne and they're going for it?
I think we're going to see something happen, and it's going to be something unlike the world has ever seen before.
Yeah, it feels more and more like the writing is coming onto the wall. Yeah, the recent rise in gold, I feel like, is one of the biggest or the strongest tells of that situation.
I got some woo woo. I think coming up in June is going to be like an anniversary of when, I think in '74 the dollar went to be the petrodollar officially.
Okay.
Some are speculating that that's somewhere, Saudis would announce that they're now part of BRICS, and they'll take. So there's a lot of that scuttlebutt going on back there too. So
Okay. You think that's why Saudi Arabia is kind of hung back from the public announcement of joining BRICS?
I mean, it's like everybody has to get their quote unquote ducks in a row, right?
They're on the fence.
Yeah. I mean, India's kind of been doing their own thing, but I think there will be a pivot one way or the other or soon. And I mean, that's kind of like closing the loop, right, on the petrodollar starting and then its demise, kind of. And it would be almost poetic, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is.
Yep.
And then, we look back in history and we realize the only way to get ourselves away from a fiat-based currency system is then to revert back to some form or shape of the prior, which is the form of value based for that was gold. Right. So having something that involves a metallic standard with gold, silver, maybe other precious metals, maybe rainbow, whatever it
Copper,
is.
right?
Well, our fiat currency is coming up on almost 100 years, right?
Yeah, I suppose that would be, well, what was the average?
100 years usually.
Is it 100 years?
Fiat currency lasts until it.
I guess you would say that it's about time.
Yeah. We got a few years.
It's a concern. It's a concern. Well, it's a very interesting thought, and I wonder what the viewers at home are wondering about BRICS and a potential new world order as well. I hope that they share their stories in the comments and that we can follow up with them with a little bit more shop talk.
Yeah.
And kind of find out where the progression of this situation continues to go as geopolitical events continue to escalate and new amazing things are being revealed every day. It's an exciting time to be alive.
Every day. Yep.
I mean, I'd love to hear their additional questions because we all do game theory all the time.
Absolutely.
Looking at different currencies, geopolitical, technology, any number of things right now, and there's so much to look at every day, every week. I mean, everything is like from a science perspective, from spiritual, from the stars, from odd weather. I mean, it's just
it's an enlightening time.
Yes. What's the Chinese curse? Right?
No, what's that? Inform me.
May you live in interesting times.
May you live. That's a curse.
That is a curse. Actually.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Well, we're in some interesting
I
times.
used to think it was a blessing, but
all right.
no.
I used to get that said to me all the time.
Yeah, they hate you.
Kidding.
No, I'm joking.
Well, very good, guys. I want to thank you for coming out here. I really appreciate all of the efforts that you put in. And I'm hoping that I can get you guys back on here because I would like to create a follow-up. I'm honestly thinking only a couple of weeks, we could have a couple of news cycles come through, and that's all it would take.
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to put a stop and a hold for a follow-up on this conversation.
Love it.
Right?
Cool.
When we have a couple more news cycles going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm in.
All right. Wonderful. I appreciate you guys coming in. And thank you very much for tuning in to an episode of the Numisphere.
Thank you for listening to the Numisphere podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Numisphere. Until next time.